In the year 2020, the world changed. The COVID-19 pandemic broke, and it was the beginning of a series of life-altering events. We were all isolated, and the things that we held dear were suddenly snatched from our schedules. Things like just going to the mall, having drinks with friends, and even going for work, and mostly to jobs we didn't like, were suddenly snatched from us, and the world changed. We experienced a collective loss of all that we held dear. And the loss was at a stage and at a level that no one ever imagined. And talking about loss, I'm going to tell you a story about my own personal loss. In the year 2018, I lost a baby. It was one of the biggest life traumatic events I've ever experienced. Her name was Ayla Liseli. A week before I was due to deliver, I went to the doctor's office for a routine checkup, and I heard the worst words that any mother would ever hear. There is no heartbeat. Now, when you're pregnant, the expectation is you will go home with your baby alive, laughing and kicking. That wasn't the case for me. I had to go home empty handed and deal with the loss that ensued. It was a very difficult time for myself and my family, naturally. And I began to realize that loss is a very uncomfortable subject for many. And yet, talking about the loss that we've experienced is part of the grieving process. And the grieving process is part of our recovery. It is essential that you talk about the losses that you incur. We attach loss to the death of a loved one. Grief is defined as the pain of loss. And it's important that you acknowledge that. So whether it's you've experienced the death of a loved one, or you've gone through a divorce, or you've lost a job, or a friendship spanning 20 years suddenly ends in betrayal, the pain of loss cannot be minimized. Months after I lost Isla, I began to learn that people were ill-equipped to handle loss and grief. I often had to deal with my fair share of expressions I would term as insensitive or inappropriate expressions of sympathy, albeit well-intentioned. But this is not the first time I experienced this. At the age of 13, I lost two siblings, Lukonde and Lungowe, within 2 weeks of each other. Family gathered with us to help us through the loss. However, help and comfort was very prescriptive, and it came to my mom in the form of, you need to be strong and move on quickly for the one child that you still have alive. That was a lot for a 30-something young mother who had just lost two children and was experiencing a double tragedy. No one ever asked her what she needed. No one ever asked her what she envisioned her life would be after that. They simply gave her remedies to what they thought would work. And I was too young to understand at the time what they meant. But the detrimental comments and the detrimental narrative of grief stuck with me for years. I was made to feel like I was too young to deserve grief. I was 13. I didn't understand death. And imagine a 13-year-old sitting with more questions than answers and wondering what would go on from them, what would happen from them. So when I lost Isla, I fully understood what my mother went through. And she started sharing experiences that she never shared. And I realized that for 30 years, my mother held on to grief because she was never given an opportunity to talk about her loss. And this is why grieving a loss cannot be rushed. There's no time, there's no time limit, there's no prescription. As much as we have the stages of grieving, they can take however long they take. So, fast forward into 2020, while still navigating the loss of a child, the experience of living through a pandemic amplified the feeling of loss. We were all thrust into grieving a life that we knew while waiting for a life that we didn't know what would look like emerge. But through it all, we held on to hope, and hope did come. The devastation brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic and the isolation after has changed our cultural DNA. How we respond to experiences and each other has completely changed and will continue to change. And so this is why it's important that we introspect and look at where our lives are going. We need to ask ourselves the questions that after such a life-changing chapter, should it be business as usual? Or should we change the way we live? One of the things that I did during isolation was join communities, online communities. When the world adapted and formed communities to support each other, I joined one of those communities. And one common thread in those communities was talking about the end of the rainbow, the sunshine after the rain. And for my family and I, we did get our rainbow. We did get our sunshine. I had a rainbow baby in December. Her name, Gianna Ngabo. Gianna means God is gracious, and Ngabo, God's shield. And for many people, the end of the rainbow looks different. It cannot be defined for anyone because only you are living through the experience that you're living through. Rainbow moments are important for sustaining hope in the new world. As things have changed and how we live and how we relate to each other, we need to have our rainbow moments. I'm going to share 3 strategies that are going to help you build resilience as you navigate loss. Number 1, in a physical space or online, be kind. Because a lot of people are going through battles that they haven't spoken about and will not speak about. You may be the only person that gives us hope by the interaction you have with them. It's important that you respect the unfolding of others because it might not look like your typical unfolding. Offer support and help out all those that are going through loss. Number 2, set boundaries. The pandemic has robbed us of boundaries. One of the things that we went through is that our living rooms became gyms, they became classrooms, they became offices. And so we were taking on a lot of things, saying yes to everything. But one important thing that you need to realize is that as a human being, we respond to different environments, and we need to be in different environments for us to function. Thus, the crisis of boundaries arose, and our mental wellness was impacted. So my strategy during this boundary infringing time was I took on new hobbies that prioritized my mental well-being. I started gardening. Before that, I had never had a plant that lived past the 2-week mark. And I started baking. Previously, I couldn't bake with premix, but I can bake from scratch now. So pick the hobbies that will help you get through this boundary infringing time. And number 3, find your people. I cannot overemphasize this point and this strategy. Your tribe is a tribe that will help you navigate loss. They will help you validate what you're feeling and understand what you're going through. I have my primary chosen community, which is my husband Stokely, my daughter Malindi, my son Ignatius, my other son Aiden, and of course Gianna and my mother. There's also my friends and family that understood what I went through and usually give me space when I need it. Find your tribe and know that whatever happens, you're not alone. And finally, in a year where we experience collective hardship and loss, it's important that we change the narrative around loss in order to find healing. We need to talk about it. We need to feel the uncomfortable feelings. And we need to support those around us, even though their grieving looks nothing like what we know or what we've read. And I want to remind you that your rainbow will come. You will smile again. And just like the seasons, life will change. Thank you.